Have you ever looked at your bank account and wondered if money has some kind of personal vendetta against you? Like, you work hard, you think you're making decent choices, yet somehow your savings account has the same energy as a desert cactus, barely surviving on the occasional drip of whatever's left after bills. Meanwhile, you're watching people around you seemingly effortless build wealth, while you're over here calculating whether you can afford both groceries and gas in the same week. Here's the brutal truth that most people refuse to acknowledge. Being broke isn't usually about how much money you make. It's about the sneaky habits that are quietly draining your wealth faster than a broken faucet. We're talking about the subtle behaviors that feel completely normal, maybe even responsible, but are actually sabotaging your financial future every single day. My name is Zach, and I've spent years studying why some people build wealth while others stay trapped in the paycheck to paycheck cycle, regardless of their income level. What I've discovered is that there are 9 specific habits that keep people financially stuck. And the crazy part is that most people don't even realize they're doing them. If you're serious about breaking free from these wealth-destroying patterns and finally building the financial security you deserve, make sure to subscribe to this channel and hit that like button, because what we're covering today could literally change your entire financial trajectory. Today, I'm going to walk you through these 9 habits that are keeping you broke. And more importantly, I'm going to show you exactly how to fix each one. Some of these might surprise you because they go against conventional financial advice. Others might make you uncomfortable because you'll recognize them in your own life. But here's the thing. Awareness is the first step toward change, and every single one of these patterns can be broken with the right approach and commitment. The first habit that's keeping you broke is something that sounds almost too basic to matter, but it's actually the foundation of every other financial mistake you'll make. You're living without clear financial direction. Think about this for a moment. If you were planning a cross-country road trip, would you just hop in your car and start driving randomly, hoping you'd eventually reach your destination? Obviously not. You'd plan your route, identify your stops, and have a clear picture of where you're headed. Yet this is exactly how most people approach their finances. They earn money, they spend money, they might even save a little money, but they have no specific financial destination in mind. Without clear targets, every financial decision becomes arbitrary. Should you buy that new gadget or put the money towards savings? Should you take on overtime work or focus on developing new skills? These questions become impossible to answer intelligently when you don't know what you're working toward. Financial goals provide the framework for making smart money decisions. When someone has a specific target, like eliminating debt within 2 years or saving for a house down payment, every spending choice gets filtered through that objective. The person with clear goals asks different questions. Instead of wondering if they can afford something, they ask whether that purchase moves them closer to or further from their financial target. This lack of direction creates a phenomenon that almost everyone has experienced. You get paid, you make what feel like reasonable purchases throughout the week, and then suddenly you're wondering where all your money disappeared. Without a clear financial destination, your money flows wherever it wants to go, which is usually toward immediate gratification rather than long-term wealth building. The second habit that's destroying your wealth is your complete lack of preparation for life's inevitable surprises. Here's a statistic that should terrify you. According to recent surveys, about 1/3 of Americans can't handle a $400 emergency without borrowing money or using a credit card. $400. That's less than most people spend on their monthly car payment, yet it represents a financial catastrophe for millions of working adults. This reveals a fundamental misunderstanding about how life actually works. Unexpected expenses aren't really unexpected at all. Cars break down, appliances fail, medical issues arise, and job situations change. These events are predictable in their unpredictability. When people haven't prepared for these entirely normal life events, they're forced to make desperate financial decisions. They might put the car repair on a credit card, borrow money from family, or even skip the repair entirely and hope the problem goes away. Each of these choices creates additional financial stress and often leads to even more expensive problems down the road. The absence of emergency savings creates a domino effect of poor financial decisions that can derail your finances for months or even years. What makes this particularly devastating is how one emergency can trigger a cascade of financial problems. Let me tell you about Sarah, a restaurant manager whose story perfectly illustrates this trap. When her car broke down, she didn't have an emergency fund, so she put the $3,200 repair bill on a high-interest credit card. Unable to pay the full balance immediately, she began carrying debt for the first time in years. The monthly minimum payment strained her budget, forcing her to skip her usual contributions to her retirement account. When her refrigerator died 3 months later, she had to finance the replacement through a store credit card with even higher interest rates. What started as one car repair snowballed into multiple debts totaling over $6,000. The stress began affecting her work performance, and she started picking up extra shifts just to make minimum payments. Instead of building wealth, she found herself working more hours just to maintain the same lifestyle while paying interest on past emergencies. This cycle could have been entirely avoided with a modest emergency fund that would have covered the initial car repair without deriving into debt. Her experience demonstrates how the lack of emergency savings doesn't just cost money. It can fundamentally alter your life trajectory and financial security. The third habit that's keeping you broke involves your relationship with spending plans, and it's probably not what you think. Most people would never run a business without tracking income and expenses, yet they run their personal finances in exactly this careless manner. They have a rough idea of what they earn and a vague sense of where their money goes, but they lack the precise awareness that comes from actually monitoring their financial flows. This ignorance creates that phenomenon where you get paid, make what feel like reasonable purchases throughout the week, and then suddenly you're wondering where all your money disappeared. Without tracking, it's impossible to identify the small spending leaks that drain your financial resources. Those $5 coffee purchases, the impulse buys at the grocery store, the subscription services you forgot about, they all add up to significant amounts over time. The average American spends $18,000 a year on non-essential items, including $300 a month on impulsive purchases. Think about that for a moment. That's $3,600 annually that just vanishes into purchases that probably don't add any meaningful value to your life. Over a decade, that's $36,000 that could have been building wealth through investments instead of disappearing into forgotten impulse buys. The fourth habit might be the most psychologically complex reason people stay broke. They live entirely in the present moment when it comes to money decisions. There's an understandable appeal to this approach. Life is short, youth doesn't last forever, and there's something to be said for enjoying your money while you're young enough to appreciate it. The problem arises when this present-focused thinking becomes so extreme that it completely ignores future consequences. These individuals make financial choices as if their future selves don't exist. They spend money on immediate pleasures while assuming that somehow, magically, their future financial needs will take care of themselves. This isn't about being overly restrictive with money or sacrificing all enjoyment for some distant retirement. It's about finding the right balance between present enjoyment and future security. But when someone operates with zero consideration for tomorrow, they create a financial time bomb that will eventually explode. I see this all the time with people who justify expensive purchases by saying things like, "You only live once," or "I work hard, I deserve this." And look, there's truth to both of those statements, but using them to rationalize every financial decision is like eating dessert for every meal because life is short. Sure, life is short, but it's also long enough that your future self will have to deal with the consequences of today's choices. The person who spends their entire paycheck on experiences, gadgets, and lifestyle upgrades might feel like they're living life to the fullest, but they're actually creating a prison for their future self. When emergencies arise, when opportunities present themselves, or when they want to make a major life change, they'll have zero options because they never built any financial foundation. The fifth habit that's destroying your wealth involves expensive patterns that people often don't even recognize as significant financial drains. These aren't necessarily the obvious vices, though those certainly qualify. We're talking about spending behaviors that feel normal and justified, but actually represent massive transfers of wealth out of your pocket. Consider someone who smokes a pack of cigarettes daily. At current prices, this habit costs roughly $250 per month. Over a year, that's $3,000. Over a decade, it's $30,000, not including the compound growth that money could have generated if invested instead. The same person who spends this amount on cigarettes will often claim they can't afford to invest money for their future. Similarly, frequent restaurant dining represents another major expense that people tend to underestimate. Grabbing lunch out daily, ordering dinner a few times per week, these seemingly small choices can easily consume $500 to $800 monthly. Again, this is money that could be building wealth instead of disappearing into temporary consumption. But here's where it gets really interesting, and this might sting a little. The subscription economy has created an entirely new category of wealth destruction that most people are completely blind to. The average American family now spends nearly $300 per month on subscriptions. $300. That's $3,600 annually, and here's the kicker. Most people underestimate their subscription spending by over $100. We're not just talking about Netflix and Spotify anymore. There are subscription services for everything now. Meal kits, razor blades, car washes, fitness apps, meditation programs, cloud storage, gaming services, news websites, productivity software, and dozens of others. Each one seems reasonable in isolation, but together they create this constant drain on your finances that happens automatically every month. The psychological trap here is brilliant from a business perspective, but devastating for consumers. Companies have designed these offerings to be as easy as possible to sign up for and as difficult as possible to cancel. They count on subscription fatigue, where managing multiple services becomes so overwhelming that people just keep paying rather than deal with the hassle of canceling. I know people who are paying for gym memberships at 3 different locations, streaming services they haven't used in months, and software subscriptions for programs they tried once and forgot about. When I help them audit their subscriptions, they're usually shocked to discover they're spending $200 to $400 monthly on services they rarely or never use. The 6th habit that keeps people broke reveals something uncomfortable about human psychology. They make purchasing decisions based on what others might think rather than what actually makes financial sense. This behavior is so common, it's become a defining characteristic of the modern consumer mindset, yet most people who engage in it would deny doing so if asked directly. Watch people at a shopping mall, observe social media posts, or notice what happens when someone gets a promotion at work. You'll witness this phenomenon repeatedly. Someone buys an expensive watch not because they need better timekeeping, but because they want colleagues to notice their success. Another person leases a luxury car they can barely afford because they believe it projects an image of prosperity. These decisions aren't driven by practical needs or genuine enjoyment. They're motivated by the desire to create impressions. The psychological trap runs deeper than simple vanity. Many people have convinced themselves that looking successful will somehow lead to actual success. They believe that if they dress the part, drive the right car, and live in the right neighborhood, opportunities will naturally flow their way. While appearance certainly matters in some professional contexts, this thinking often becomes an expensive form of self-deception. The real irony is that truly wealthy individuals often display the opposite behavior. They drive older cars, wear modest clothing, and live in houses that are comfortable rather than impressive. They understand that every dollar spent on appearances is a dollar not working to generate more wealth. Meanwhile, people who are actually struggling financially are often the ones spending the most money trying to look rich. This appearance-focused spending creates a vicious cycle. The more money someone spends on looking successful, the less money they have available for actual wealth-building activities. They become trapped in a performance that requires increasingly expensive props while their real financial situation deteriorates behind the scenes. The 7th habit involves a fundamental misunderstanding about how money should flow through your life. Most people approach their finances backward. They pay everyone else first, then hope something will be left over for their own future. This might seem like the responsible approach, but it practically guarantees that wealth building will never become a priority. Here's how this typically plays out. Someone receives their paycheck and immediately starts paying bills, buying groceries, filling up their gas tank, and handling various other expenses. If anything remains at the end of the month, they might put it into savings or investments. The problem with this approach is that there's rarely anything meaningful left over. Breaking these 9 habits isn't about perfection, it's about progress. Start with one habit that resonates most with your situation and commit to changing it over the next 30 days. Remember, wealthy people aren't born with special money genes, they simply developed better financial habits than everyone else. Your financial future isn't determined by your past mistakes or current situation, it's shaped by the decisions you make starting today.